There is a question people whisper more than they ask out loud, a question that leaves a cold, heavy silence hanging in the air long after the words leave your mouth. Why do people cheat? Most people want a simple answer, something clean and logical that makes the world easier to understand. They want to blame weakness or selfishness or a bad relationship. They want a reason that keeps the story tidy and predictable. But the truth is rarely tidy, and it almost never fits into the explanations we create to make ourselves feel safe. Cheating doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the mind long before anything physical ever happens. It grows in the quiet spaces between two people who once felt close but somehow became strangers inside the same story. It begins with a feeling that something is missing, something the person cannot name because naming it would force them to confront the truth they've been avoiding. And the truth is this: most people don't cheat because they stop loving their partner. They cheat because they stop loving the person they have become in that relationship. They cheat because they feel unseen, unheard, unimportant, or quietly suffocated by expectations. They never learned how to communicate. Sometimes they cheat because they want to feel alive again, even if it lasts only a moment, even if it destroys everything afterward. No one ever likes to admit how vulnerable people truly are, how easy it is to start craving attention when you've gone too long without feeling chosen, how quickly loneliness can turn into temptation, how a simple conversation, a compliment, a moment of feeling understood by someone new can open a door you didn't even realize existed. People don't talk about the emotional hunger that builds slowly, like a quiet storm gathering behind the ribs. They don't talk about the fear of aging, the fear of routine, the fear of becoming invisible in your own life. They don't talk about how sometimes a person cheats, not because they want someone else, but because they want to escape the version of themselves that they no longer recognize. And then there's the darker side, the part most people avoid. Some people cheat because they never learned how to deal with their own emptiness. They used love as a distraction. And when that love stopped distracting them, they reached for another escape. Not because of the person they were with, but because of the emptiness they carried long before any relationship began. There are countless reasons, but they all come from the same place: unmet needs. Emotional, physical, psychological, spiritual. Needs that were ignored, misunderstood, or never expressed because vulnerability feels dangerous and silence feels safer. People don't cheat because they are monsters. They cheat because they are human. And being human means being flawed, afraid, impulsive, lonely, hungry for validation, or simply lost. And if you've ever been lost before, you know how easily a person can make a decision that their future self will spend years trying to forgive. And yet, as painful as this truth is, there is something even harder to accept. Cheating almost always reveals more about the cheater than the person who was betrayed. It reflects their wounds, their insecurities, their fears, their lack of emotional maturity. It reflects the work they never did, the conversations they never had, the emotional responsibilities they never learned to carry. But that's where the story begins, not where it ends. The painful truth is that cheating rarely happens in a moment. It builds, it brews, it grows quietly in the small cracks a relationship collects over time. The ones nobody wants to look at because acknowledging them means admitting that something isn't working anymore. And people don't like admitting that. They prefer pretending everything is fine until the silence becomes too loud to ignore. What most people never understand is that betrayal doesn't begin with touching someone else. It begins with withdrawing from the person you promised to love. It begins with the late night scrolling, the long pauses in conversations, the secrets, the little lies that seem harmless, the emotional pulling away that slowly tells the other person, without words, that something is shifting. It begins with conversations that should have been had months ago, but were avoided because the truth felt like a risk no one wanted to take. People cheat when something inside them feels unaddressed, when they feel unseen, when they feel disconnected from the person they used to be before life, stress, routine, and unspoken resentment got in the way. Sometimes they cheat because they believe there is a version of them that exists somewhere else, in someone else's eyes. and they chase that fantasy because it makes them feel alive again in ways their current life hasn't in a long time. And that's the word that comes up more than any other in stories of infidelity: alive. You would be shocked at how many people don't cheat for pleasure or excitement, but simply because they want to feel something after months or years of feeling numb, numb in their relationship, numb in their responsibilities, numb in the routines of adulthood that turned them into someone they never intended to become. For others, cheating comes from fear: fear of conflict, fear of intimacy, fear of being truly known because being known means being judged. And being judged feels like a threat when your self esteem is fragile. So they create situations where they can escape before they ever have to face their deeper emotions. They cheat to avoid, not to explore. They cheat to run, not to seek. But here's the part people always forget: most cheating doesn't come from lack of love, it comes from lack of emotional skill. People never learned how to say, I feel lonely, I feel disconnected, I'm hurting, and I don't know how to talk about it. I don't feel desired anymore. I don't know how to express what I need without sounding demanding. I'm afraid you don't see me the way you used to. Instead of saying these things, they swallow the words. They push the feelings down. They bury them under work, under silence, under routine, under the daily performance of being fine. And buried feelings always look for another exit. Sometimes that exit is another person. And then there are those who cheat because they never learned how to be satisfied with what is real. They chase intensity because reality feels dull. They chase the high of newness because newness doesn't require emotional responsibility. They want the rush without the work, the excitement without the vulnerability, the attention without the accountability that true love demands. These are the people who confuse chemistry with connection, attraction with compatibility, and validation with affection. They don't cheat because something is wrong with their partner, they cheat because something is unstable within themselves. And then, of course, there's the simplest reason of all, the one that almost no one wants to admit out loud. People cheat because they think they won't get caught. They rely on secrecy as a shield. They gamble their relationship on the hope that their partner won't see the signs, won't ask the questions, won't notice the emotional distance until it's too late to turn back. But cheating doesn't stay hidden. Even if the acts stay in the shadows, the consequences bleed into everything. The guilt shows up in their eyes. The defensiveness shows up in their voice. The emotional absence shows up in their presence. The intimacy shifts. The energy changes. The touch becomes different, even if the pattern of the relationship remains the same. You can lie with your words, but your energy tells the truth. And betrayal has a specific energy, a weight, a subtle coldness that the heart can feel even when the mind hasn't found proof. Yet people always say, if they cheated, it means they didn't love me. But love isn't the issue. Emotional maturity is. Self awareness is. Communication is. Accountability is. A person can love you deeply and still cheat on you if they have unhealed wounds, unmet needs, unresolved trauma, or an emotional emptiness they keep trying to fill in all the wrong places. You can give someone the world, but if they don't know how to receive love, they will always look for it somewhere else, even if what they're chasing is an illusion. And the irony is, most people who cheat end up more broken afterward. They think the affair will fix something inside them, but afterward, when the thrill fades and the consequences begin, they're left with the same emptiness, the same unresolved issues, the same unhealed parts they tried to escape. Except now, they've added guilt, shame, and a shattered relationship on top of it. Cheating doesn't solve anything, it only exposes what was ignored. But here's something even deeper, something most people don't realize until much later. Cheating forces you to confront the truth you were running from, the truth about your relationship, the truth about your partner, the truth about yourself. It brings everything buried to the surface, whether you want it there or not. And that's where the next part of the story begins. Not with blame, not with judgment, but with understanding. Because you cannot fix what you refuse to examine. In the end, Cheating is not a story about villains and victims, nor is it a simple question of right and wrong, but rather a complicated intersection of unmet emotions, unspoken needs, and human frailty that rarely fits neatly into the narratives we try to tell ourselves to make the pain easier to swallow. It forces us to see the places where connection weakened, the moments where honesty was avoided, the silent wounds each person brought into the relationship long before the betrayal even happened. And while the act itself is devastating, humiliating, and deeply unfair, it often becomes the moment that exposes everything that was breaking beneath the surface, everything that needed attention, everything that had been quietly asking to be healed. And maybe that is the only real meaning to pull from something so painful. Cheating shatters the illusion that love alone is enough, and in that shattering, it gives both people a choice to either confront themselves with unprecedented honesty or keep repeating the same patterns in different places, with different faces, hoping for a different outcome. Healing begins not with forgiving the betrayal, but with understanding what allowed it to happen in the first place, what wounds were ignored, what boundaries were missing, what truths were never spoken. And when the dust finally settles, when the anger fades and the shock becomes softer, you realize that the end of the story is not about who was wrong or who was right, but about who is willing to grow, who is willing to learn, and who is brave enough to walk forward carrying clarity instead of bitterness.